The Arab Spring is part of the long march of human history in search of dignity. And as we all know, the march of history in search of dignity is full of the wreckage of dreams and hopes that have nonetheless culminated in wonderful things, like this wonderful country we're in right now, Canada, with its great diversity and ongoing political dialogue. My name is Abderrahim Foukara. I run Al Jazeera Media Network in North and South America. And it gives me enormous pleasure to be here today to moderate this very, very, very important panel. And I would like at the outset to say thank you to the organizers of the Halifax International Security Forum on behalf of myself, on behalf of my colleagues in all the Al Jazeera bureaus, and on behalf of all my colleagues at the headquarters of Al Jazeera in Doha, the capital of the state of Qatar, for having extended this invitation to me to moderate this panel. Et comme je suis originaire du Maroc, je suis dans un pays de très grande diversité, un pays francophone comme le Canada. Je dois bien sûr remercier les organisateurs du forum et dire un grand bonjour et un grand merci au grand peuple du Canada, ce pays de très grande diversité. Ça fait la troisième, la quatrième, peut-être la cinquième fois que je rends visite au Canada.
Is the third time that I've made it to Canada, and like millions of people who've come to Canada to visit or to settle, we're delighted.
Live on one of the channels of Al Jazeera Mubashir. And if you allow me 15 seconds to just greet the viewers watching us throughout the Middle East in Arabic, I'd be really grateful. مشاهدي الجزيرة الذين يتابعون هذه الجلسة، مرحبا بكم إلى هاليفاكس، مرحبا بكم إلى منتدى هاليفاكس. أشكر المنظمين باسم زملائي في الجزيرة سواء في المكاتب أو في المقر في عاصمة دولة قطر الدوحة. أشكر المنظمين على هذه الدعوة الكريمة لإدارة هذه الجلسة. Welcome to all of you again. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the panelists. I find it a little bit of an irony that we started off with the Arab Spring. In terms of the panelists, we don't have an Arab, we have a Kurd and an Israeli. I am an Arab, but I'm not a panelist. I'm just here to be your GPS. You will drive this conversation, so I will be your GPS in guiding you between now and the end of the session, which will be promptly at 11 o'clock. I would like to, for those who are already tweeting about the conference, but also following this conversation, just to remind them that the Halifax Twitter handle is HFX Forum, and the hashtag is HISF 2017. Let me begin with a quick lay of the land. As I said, I'll be the GPS, but I'll ask at the outset each one of the two panelists to say a few things, 2 to 3 minutes as introductory remarks. And after that, I will come to you for questions and comments. Please be generous. Otherwise, if you're not generous with your comments and questions, you will force me to stop being the GPS and to start being the driver. But I want you to be the driver, whether you're here with us in the room or outside following us through social media. Gives me great pleasure to introduce Minister Falah Mustafa Bakir. I will not go into the details of everything that he's done because you have that as part of his bio in the link that you received, but also in the various literature that was distributed by the forum. But I will just say that he was appointed head of Kurdistan, the Kurdistan Regional Government, KRG, I apologize, Department of Foreign Relations. He administers the KRG's foreign policy and tries to bolster its relations with various communities outside Kurdistan. We have Ms. Tzipi Livni, who you all know. She is the head of Hatnua party in Israel. She's a member of the 20th Israeli Knesset. She's a former Israeli foreign minister. The list goes on. You can check it yourselves, all what she's done in the past up to this particular moment. I start with you for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll take 2 or 3 minutes from Ms. Livni, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. If you'll allow me, just a quick reminder. The title and the parameters of this panel are the rebuilding the Middle East from civil war to civil society. We have a Kurd, as I said, an Israeli. It does not mean that the conversation is going to focus solely on Israel or solely on Kurdistan. They can talk about various other issues happening in the region and elsewhere, but I'll come to you also for that, for questions and commentary, please.
Thank you, Abderrahim. I think I'm tempted after the English, French, and Arabic to speak in Kurdish, but I will keep it to English. I will start by thanking Peter and the entire team of Halifax International Security Forum for inviting us and giving us the platform. I'd also like to thank the Ministry of National Defense for hosting us, and thank you all for being at this panel. As a non-Arab, I would like to say that the Kurdish Spring started back in 1991. 1991, after the first Gulf War, the people of Kurdistan rose against the former regime of Saddam Hussein. But we were able to succeed in that uprising because we had a leadership, a vision, and a commitment. And these were the important criteria behind the success of the uprising, while there was at the same time an uprising in the southern part of Iraq that did not succeed. But we went ahead. We benefited from the protection that was provided by the US-led coalition at the time, Operation Northern Watch, and also the safe haven that was established for us to start our journey to build a democracy, although it is an ongoing process. But indeed, we went to elections. 19th of May 1992, we started our first ever free and fair elections in Kurdistan. At that time, the same as it happened on the 25th of September this year, the whole world told us, don't go for elections, don't do it. We still don't understand why you preach us and teach us democracy and elections, why when it comes to us, it's not good for us or it's not a good time. We did the elections, we succeeded, we elected our parliament, we formed our government, and we started the journey to build a civil society. We were a revolutionary movement in the mountain fighting for our rights. All of a sudden found ourselves to be in charge of administrating a civil administration. It was not an easy journey. We did not have experience. We did not have support. The neighborhood that we live in is not that friendly. Access to the region is not easy. We don't have access to the sea. We do not have a country that does not have Kurdish population in, i.e. the geography is our #1 adversary. But still we managed because we had the will, we had the determination, we had the people with us. So therefore, when we talk about the Middle East from civil war to civil society, I don't know whether it is a continued cycle or it's from civil society to civil war, because both are civil, but two different concepts, two different settings. What we need is that the right to self-determination is an important principle, is in the UN Charter, one of the basic human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but at the same time, it's handcuffed with the principle of sovereignty. We have been suffering under Saddam Hussein. We suffered chemical gas, genocidal campaign, Anfal campaign, mass destruction and mass killing. When we were asking for help, we were told this is an internal matter for a sovereign state, which is a legitimate state represented at the UN. And this still continues. We do ask you, where are you in these principles? On the 25th of September this year, the people of Kurdistan region of Iraq went to the ballot boxes to exercise a very basic, peaceful, democratic right. Yet we were told that was not good, and we were collectively punished. I will stop there.
I was going to say, even in a democratic country like Canada, someone has to put a foot down, and I have to put a foot down and just ask you to wrap up. Ms. Livni.
Thank you. Yes, Israel is not an Arab state, it's a Jewish state, but yet we live in the Middle East, and the Arab Spring that turned into an Islamic winter in some places affects Israel as well. And we are all like you human beings, and to see the horrific pictures coming from the region, it's something that touches our heart. And I believe that what we are doing here, talking about this, putting it on the table, is something that is very important. This is almost the closing session, and I felt while watching this wonderful video, not only before this panel, but during all the conference, there's a huge clash between the music and the pictures. And I feel that while we are sitting here with suits, well, almost, excuse me, I'm on my way to the airport, but we are talking about interest, about security, about states, and we are less talking or listening to the peoples. And it was very clear to me when I heard this really brave woman from Yemen talking about her states, it was not about Iran, it was not about the Saudis, it was about the people, as well as I hear now my Kurdish friend. Few words about civil war and civil society in the region. Firstly, in most of the places, I'm not sure that we can call it civil war. It's not only a war between different civilians of the same state about the values of the state or the future of the state. In most of the places, we have involvement of other powers, other states, terrorist organizations. And this is something that sometimes they affect and even force some of the civilians to be part of something that they didn't want to be in the first place. This is one. Secondly, and this is in a way bad news, and let's speak about the day after, about civil society. The Middle East was formed, the borders were formed by human beings in the last century. And sometimes you have in the same state, it's not nation state, it's different tribes, different religions with hate and difficult relations amongst them, and the day after would be the same. But there is one thing which is very important to have any hope, and this is a condition. It's not the only one. It's necessary, but it's not the only one. The day after, we cannot afford a situation in which the day after would live in one of these states, terrorist organization, as an armed militia or political party, or involvement of third party inside this state. Because, I heard here the Turkish chief of staff, and he was talking about terror and about terrorist organization in a very impressive manner. He was talking about the terrorist organization that worries Turkey. He was not talking about the terrorist organization that worries us, like Hezbollah and Hamas. More than that, Turkey sometimes supports Hamas. And others are talking about their problems, and we need to have to use this forum and the international community to set some rules that applies to everyone. Nobody can support terror. There is no just cause for terror. It doesn't represent any interest of the international community. And the idea of having a terrorist organization, one branch is a terrorist organization and the other political party, should be unacceptable. I mean, there is no state in the world or no constitution in the world in which you can be both. In Israel, our Supreme Court denied the right of the racist party to participate in election. In Spain, a party that supported the Basque in a violent manner was denied in election, and the EU Supreme Court accepted it. Well, I don't think that this is something that represents an Israeli interest, Lebanese interest, or other interest. This is something that we need to understand. The only way to have civil society or to have real civil society is if the day after we have democracies, real democracies, and we don't have the control of third parties inside these states, and we don't have terrorist organizations playing their role with armed militia, because these are not free societies. And in these places, we would not have real civil society. And at the beginning, to start with, I didn't mention names of states or terrorist organizations, well, almost, because I want all of us to understand that this is a common interest. One day it applies in one place, and the next day you find it at your home.
Okay.
So let's be united on this at first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. We have exactly 38 minutes and 26 seconds for your questions and commentary. We're going to float microphones. Please identify yourself, your affiliation, and ask your question or make your comment. And tell us who exactly your question or comment is addressed to from the two panelists. Please.
Thank you. Carrie Buck, Canada's ambassador to NATO. Iran. In some ways, the Persian Spring happened too early and was brutally crushed. So my question is there a chance for revolution or evolution inside Iran? And what impact would that have in the region? It's a big question. But where do you see Iran, post-Supreme Leader, going? Is there a chance?
Ambassador, do you want a Kurdish perspective or an Israeli perspective, or both?
We can have both.
All right. So how about we start with you, Ms. Livni?
Okay. Maybe there was an opportunity, but I think that the fact that the international community legitimizing Iran these days and opening Iran for foreign investments and giving legitimacy to things that are, from my perspective, unacceptable, this in a way can postpone any ideas of internal changes inside. Where the Supreme Leader is heading, he represents an ideological extremist ideology, religious ideology, and we need to understand when they represent this religious ideology, there is no hope for peace or understandings. They are acting against all of us, whether it's moderate Islam or Jews or Christians, because of who we are, because of our values, while trying to achieve a nuclear weapon, while posturing terror. And as I said before, it can be Yemen, it can be Hamas, Hezbollah, and they are getting stronger. And the world focused on the nuclear program. But now is the threshold or the demands of the world are so low that as long as you don't have a nuclear weapon, you can do whatever you want. You can support terror, you can finance terror. No. So now it's time to deal with Iran in connection to what they are doing in the region. Hezbollah is a designated terrorist organization. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. And according to United Nations Security Council Resolution 1559, 1701, there is arms embargo and a resolution to dismantle them. But simultaneously, the world now decides, according to an agreement that referred just to the nuclear stuff, to legitimize Iran. And therefore, I'm not optimistic. I'm very pessimistic because Iran is getting stronger now. We have Iran, we have its influence in Iraq, and this is maybe something that you would refer to. We have them in Syria in ideas of staying in Syria, not just, acting now, but staying in Syria, and of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon. And we need to address it. It's not only an Israeli interest. It should be the interest of the entire international community or the free world.
Mr. Bakir.
Well, as far as we are concerned, we have a long border with Iran. Iran wants a role to play, and Iran wants to be the regional superpower. And Iran is the most influential country in Iraq today. The only part that Iran does not have that influence is in Kurdistan region. But if the situation today continues, then that would be also their arena of activities. So therefore, this is from our perspective. We have to deal with them on a daily basis. They have the capability to harm us, and they have already done that. After the referendum, they closed the borders. They have helped the Iraqis to attack us. Iranian-backed Shia militias are attacking Kurdistan region. We are still asking the United States and the international community to interfere to impose a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. That's why the international community has to sort it out. Do you want Iran to be the regional superpower to deal with? Or do you want us to sort it out with them? Because that only nuclear issue is something, but there are a lot of things that are going on there to be dealt with. Therefore, it is important for us that the problem between the international community and Iran not to be at our expense. Because we are a small player, we have a long border, we have to deal with Iran on a daily basis.
Okay, I just would like to remind everyone that we are here to talk about anything you want to talk about, but we are here to talk about something that the forum wants to talk about, which is from civil war to civil society. I almost forgot that I was going to use a soccer metaphor, and then I remember that we're in a country known for hockey, not soccer. So anyway, I'll go from that wing, a question from this wing.
Thank you. Basma Momani from the University of Waterloo, CG, and Brookings. With all due respect, and I'm very happy to see both Israeli and Kurdish, who are really important parts of the fabric of the Middle East, but seeing that 80% of the population is Arab, it's a bit of an oversight, if I may, that there's no Arab sitting on the panel. The one question I wanted to also mention, if I may, is that, and I'm also saddened, Minister Livni, you said you're a Jewish state, with all due respect, but 20% of your population is Arab, and these are citizens of Israel. And so I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged. I do want to go to the question of civil society, because civil society is really the only way to rebuild the region. And I'd love to know more about, give us best practices as two prominent leaders in your countries. Give us two best practices, or the best practices of what to do about getting civil society. And can there be something that to be learned and taken to other parts of the Middle East? Thank you.
Mr. Bakir, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, indeed, but the absence of an Arab
Jewish state.
The absence of an Arab member on the panel is not our fault, but it seems that because of the sensitivities, some people refuse to be sitting here on the table, on the panel. So this is not our fault. I don't think it's the organizers' fault. And that is the nature and the mentality in the Middle East, of course. You have to address it to learn to accept each other. Okay, you are a different nationality, you are a different ethnicity, but accept to sit down next to your neighbor. As far as we are concerned in Kurdistan region, we have already suffered in the last 3 years of ISIS. But before the military operations, we said that we have to have a political plan for the day after. Nobody in Baghdad was interested in that. And still they are not interested. They still do not have a political plan to deal with the aftermath and with the post-ISIS era, especially in the Sunni Arab areas, because of the Shia-Sunni power struggle. They are not interested. Sunni areas are destroyed, infrastructure devastated, Sunni population displaced, and that makes Baghdad happy. So therefore, the problem is that now they want to destroy Kurdistan to dismantle the KRG as an entity. But we have encouraged women participation. We have encouraged youth participation, civil society, free media, all the democratic values and principles in order to live. And Kurdistan has been, from 1991 until today, safe, secure, stable, compared with all the instability in the rest of Iraq. That's why, if there is will, there is way. We have done it. Iraq can do it if they accept the rules, if they accept the constitution, that over 80% of the people in Iraq voted for it. But unfortunately, 55 violations of the constitution has taken place. That's why you reach an agreement with them, but there is no implementation for that agreement. We have voted for a constitution. The constitution has been violated. That's why we decided to go to the referendum, because we thought we have no future in Iraq. We wanted a future of our own and also to live together in peace and fraternity.
Obviously, if we had somebody from the Iraqi government, they would, goes without saying, have a different perspective. But you've
Thank
spoken
you.
your mind.
I would
Please.
like to answer your comment on the Jewish state, but I will take it as a question, if I may. And to explain what does it mean when I say Israel is a Jewish state. Israel is a Jewish democratic state. It's the nation state of the Jewish people, in accordance also to United Nations resolution from 1947. When I say Jewish democratic state, it means that we are living with values of Israel, also as a Jewish but also as a democratic state, and the meaning is in one sentence, nation state of the Jewish people with equal rights to all its citizens. And therefore, all the Arab citizens who live in Israel are equal right citizens. And this is part of our Jewish values. I mean, love thy neighbor is not written in the American Constitution. It's part of our history and part of our values. And this is also the meaning of Israel as being a democracy. Now, unfortunately, we have a national conflict with the Palestinians. I see that Mr. Barghouti left, but we have a national conflict with the Palestinians. What the Jewish people did since, not since the creation of the State of Israel, but even before, in each and every time that there was a resolution on the table that represent our interest, but also was against the other, we accepted it. In 1947, the United Nations resolution, it was a petition plan saying, supporting the creation of a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jewish leaders accepted it, even though it was on the entire ancient land of our forefathers, because we were focused on building our own state. And according, as I said, to our values, as part of the soul of independence of the State of Israel, all the citizens have equal rights without any discrimination. Now, unfortunately, the Arabs were not willing to accept this resolution. And since then, we are still focused on the idea, especially me, if I may say, as representative of these views in Israel, on the idea of two states for two peoples. Each state gives an answer to national aspiration of different peoples, Israel to the Jewish people, and the future Palestinian state to the Palestinians. And I would not accept those that are preaching for the creation of a Palestinian state without recognizing the right of the Jewish people for a state of our own. This is the problem, this is the conflict, this is the solution. We accepted it. I hope that in this panel we will also have some representatives of the Arab world to speak about it as well.
Okay, and incidentally, if there are any people, Palestinian or otherwise, who hold a different view and they want to express it, this is an open forum. Please let me know and I'll give you the opportunity to raise it. Please, madam.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Lindborg with the United States Institute of Peace, and I want to really thank the organizers for this topic and for starting the video with Tunisia, which is, of course, one of the only countries that has withstood the Arab Spring and not gone into chaos, including the Nobel Peace Prize for their civil society quartet. So it's a key issue. I have two questions. The first one for Minister Bakir, and that is, I was in Iraq about a year ago where there were street demonstrations in cities throughout Iraq, not so much in Kurdistan. But they were young people who were demonstrating not on the basis of sectarian desires, but in demands for better government. And we've seen a flowering of civil society throughout Iraq, throughout Kurdistan. I attended a big conference about a year ago there. What do you see the possibility and the potential of that civil society and that set of young actors eager for a better government to play in the elections that are coming up and in moving forward in a post-ISIS world? And for both of you, I have the question of how do you see the role of religious actors who have such extraordinary influence, both personally and institutionally, with civil society throughout the region? Thank you.
Well, as for the first part of the question, in fact, our fear and our worries is that Iraq is not going to be the federal democratic pluralistic state that we were promised by the coalition and in the constitution. Iraq is more and more becoming Islamic. And the fact that last week in the Iraqi parliament, a personal status law was discussed or deliberated, allowing a 9-year-old girl to be married, this puts a lot of things. And last year, when the Iraqi parliament, while we were in the height of the fight against Islamic State, they were discussing banning, consuming, and trading alcohol. So that's why we were worried about our future. Is it a diverse country? Because we have Muslims, non-Muslims, Arabs, non-Arabs living together. Federalism for us meant power sharing and wealth sharing. This is not happening. Therefore, democracy is not only about having elections on time. I think people in Baghdad today, they think that by having the elections on time, that's democracy. That's only the beginning of the process. Therefore, civil society has to be more vocal, has to be given opportunity, and they have to be actively engaged. In Kurdistan region, when there was a quota for women, the quota in Iraq was 25% for women and age was 30 years. We changed that. We made the women quota 30% and we lowered the age 25. It was a win-win and it was both in support of youth and women, and we have higher percentage of women. We have women in government as ministers, in parliament, female Peshmergas fighting for our rights. And this is exactly, even in 1325, UN Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, Kurdistan led the National Action Plan for Iraq. Of course, we are ready to work with Iraqis in areas that are for the benefit of both, but Iraq is not ready with us. That's why today we have a real problem in the country. We are at risk of another civil war and another war. We are at brink of war if the international community does not get seriously engaged, because there is more and more pressure on daily basis on the Iranian-backed Shia militias and Iraqi army to come over to Kurdistan to destroy the entity which is recognized in the constitution. That's why, if that happens, 3 main areas will be affected. First, it would provide an opportunity for extremism and terrorism. Second, it will create another wave of asylum seekers to Europe, because we already have 1.6 million refugees and IDPs in Kurdistan, but them and people of Kurdistan would start to flee. And third, there would be disruption in the energy supply.
Ms. Livni, do you want to chime in?
Yes. Well, I completely agree that democracy is more than elections. It's a set of values. And the set of values must apply on parties, on governments, and civil society. Basically, what the civil society needs to do is implement it in the space that the government is living, when the responsibility is still on the shoulders of government. You ask about religious in this story, and I would say it in other words. It's not about religion, it is more about how some religious leaders are taking the religion to the extreme. Because I believe, frankly, as whether it's about Judaism or Islam or Christianity, I believe that all these religions is about love and harmony and not about hating the other. But there are those leaders, religious leaders, that are taking it to the extreme. And this is what I say also in Israel, because when you have, whether it's the leader of the Islamic movement in Israel calling and trying to ignite the region for their own, whether it's political or religious needs, calling, to save Al-Aqsa Mosque and all this stuff, something that can ignite the region in a moment, or whether, without any comparison to the political stuff, the way also Judaism is being expressed by some political parties in Israel or religious leaders. And what I say here in English, I say in Hebrew. Let's have this understanding that the control of the values of the state is not in the hands of religious leaders, because if this would be the situation, we will have a clash between the values of, we were talking here about empowering women, about equal rights, unfortunately sometimes. And as I said before, it's all over the region and not only in the region. There are those that for them women are not, according to their understanding or the day they express their religions, women are not entitled to have equal rights.
In both religions?
In all the religions.
In all religions, okay.
It's not, as I said, it's not the religions. It's not the religions. it's the religious leaders, whether it's imam or others, that are taking it to these places. And therefore, I think that having this shared set of values, whether within states or those believing in this in different states, we should unite. Once said, let's liberals of the world unite.
Okay.
Let's fight for these values against those that are trying to transcend it into something which is unacceptable.
Okay, we have 19 minutes, so I need a condensed comment from you before I go to somebody else.
We in Kurdistan region of Iraq, we believe in the separation of religion and state. And the clerics in Kurdistan region played an important role in working with civil society, with women's organizations, with the government, with the parliament, because they are a force for moderation, and they have played an important role even in the fight against ISIS.
Unless I get a frontal question, so to speak, I'm going to go to the gentleman over there. Can you bear with me a second, just while I get one from this, because we've already got a question from that side. Please go ahead, and then I'll come to the gentleman over there.
Thanks very much. Gary Keller, former Chief of Staff to Foreign Minister John Baird. Minister for Kurdistan, it's great to see you here. In one of your answers earlier, you talked about having a political plan for the day after. Obviously, the referendum took place a few months ago, and you would have known what to expect from the international community's general reaction. So I guess my question is a simple one. What's the political plan for the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a good question. In fact, our expectation from the international community was to be neutral. We knew that they don't support us. But we asked them, please don't oppose us. Don't be against us. But day after day, statement after statement was issued. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's unlawful. It's non-binding. Why all ills and errors? Why? A people went to the ballot boxes to exercise a democratic right. Is there more legitimacy than the people when they go to the ballot boxes? You told us that. You democratic societies, you civilized world, you taught us democracy and going back to the people. When we went back to our people, you tell us that is illegal and illegitimate. It's not fair. That's why our political plan for the day after is that Erbil and Baghdad to start a comprehensive, constructive dialogue on the basis of the Constitution to ensure power sharing and wealth sharing. But before then, we need to have a withdrawal of all these Iranian-backed Shia militias, to have a joint security mechanism, Peshmerga, Iraqi army and coalition, joint administration for the disputed areas, and preparing the ground for the elections. We want to do that peacefully. We want to sort out our problems with Baghdad through dialogue and peaceful means. But Baghdad is not ready to talk to the Kurdistan region. Baghdad's position is that now they are victorious, winner takes all, they destroy Kurdistan and they would be arrested. That's not the right thing to do.
The gentleman over there, please.
Thank you. Imam Hanna from Lebanon. My question is actually to everyone in Halifax here. I am a member of the civil society. I run a freedom of expression organization. But I also want to be pragmatic. Should we completely forget the idea that democracy is an ingredient of rebuilding the Middle East? Because looking at the situation, there is a very strong preference for strong men who can make stability great again in our region. So this attachment to stability and peace, given that the chaos that followed 2011 didn't please anyone, as active members of civil society, we're not seeing any single proof that democracy is anywhere close to being on the agenda. I'm talking about funding cycles, about mainly from donor communities. I'm talking about specific programs, and I'm also talking about huge support for authoritarian regimes whose actions, whose repression, whose work in prisons is actually, in my opinion, creating the ISIS 3.0 for the future. But today they're keeping the situation stable, and it seems to be good for everybody. Should I keep this pragmatism, or can you give me a different perspective and show me one example that democracy is still an ingredient for rebuilding the Middle East?
Well, I think I answered you. We were taught democratic principles and values, and we fought for that. But when we come to practice it, borders are very sacred. Nobody has to touch it. These are man-made borders. These borders will change. Whether, if not today, tomorrow. But we have to be realistic. We have to live how to be tolerant, how to accept peaceful coexistence, and respect each other. This is what we ask for. We have tried to build democracy. We are still ongoing on that, and we have come a long way. But the point is not only bringing democracy, a meaningful democracy that could be applied.
I believe that the civil society can flourish just in real democracies. I believe that this is something that we all share or need to share. And I truly hope that we see in the region real democracies. Talking about Lebanon, as I said before, the situation of an armed militia, which is also a political party, is not part of the values of democracy the way I see it. But it's not decisions that you make on your state. It is something that we all, those supporting democracies, understanding that this is a set of values. I believe that we should all work toward this. And excuse me, but going back to the question that you asked about religion, I refer to civil societies, to things that are happening inside some of the states in the region, but we need to refer to all these terrorist organizations that are taking a religion to places of hatred, of cutting heads off, and for me, trust me, it's not important whether it is Shia or Sunni, it is the same. And I hope that they would not abuse and exploit the misery of people that we have now in the region in order to get more support in doing this horrific stuff that they are doing in the region.
Education has to go together with democracy.
By the way,
education and cultural exchange, building trust and building bridges. Because democracy alone is not enough. You have to build bridges between communities. You have to invest in education, in educating people the right thing. We in Kurdistan have started that journey by educating people religious education, not only Islamic education, to tell them that there is more than one religion, and to tell them about diversity so that we grow up accepting each other.
Excuse me, saying something not only about the region, but about democracies. And I think that you are right, and not connecting only to the region. Listen, my friends, and this is a very important thing to understand. All over the world, we see erosion of the values of democracy. We see more populism, we see more hatred, we see xenophobia, we see abuse of fear by leaders, and this is something that affects almost all the democracies in the world. And I think that by turning a blind eye to this, we are in a way cooperating with these trends, and we need to stop it. And I believe that those that are not willing to accept it and live with the outcome need to fight for it together. And sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes it's not easy, especially when those that are fighting for democracy in some of the states are isolated and being portrayed as something else. And so we need to be united on this.
On your behalf, I will remind people here that your question was addressed to everyone, not just the panelists. So please feel free to chime in if you feel like doing so. Let me just give you a quick roadmap of where I'm going with the next three questions. So I'm going to the lady in the back, then the gentleman there, and then the gentleman with the beard right in front of you. Please.
Hello, I'm Smadar Perry. I'm a Middle East editor in Yediot Achronot, which is the largest daily in Israel. My question is addressed to both panelists, or anyone who would like to answer. We are all witnessing these days a huge dramatic drama in Saudi Arabia. It's a huge storm. And my question is it for the benefit for the civil society in Saudi Arabia, while the Crown Prince is promising to turn Saudi Arabia into a state of modern Islam, or is it endangering and shaking the stability of certain countries in the Middle East? Thank you.
Who do you want to start with? Okay, how about we start with you?
Well, I have not that much engagement with that issue, and also Saudi Arabia. We hope that the Middle East in its entirety would change towards the right direction. There are too many struggles in the Middle East. Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and others. We need to address these issues, and also the international community to be serious about addressing these issues. This is what I can say, but we need a change in the entire Middle East so that the population would feel that there is a change towards the better.
Given the sensitivity that you know between on the relations between Israel and the Saudis, I would try to be cautious in a way. 2 years ago I was in another, security conference elsewhere, competitive, and there was the new Saudi foreign minister talking about the changes and implement changes in Saudi. He's talking about empowering women, and hey, women can drive in Saudi now. And when at first I saw the resignation of Hariri, I thought that maybe this can be a message about the complexity of the situation of, on one hand, our militia, the other legitimate partner in the government. But I think that it's too early to know where are we heading when it comes to the decisions that are being made in Saudi these days.
Okay. The gentleman over there.
Jack James from Washington. And speaking on behalf of Washington, I'm going to read a quote from a former foreign minister or secretary of state. For 60 years, my country, the United States, pursued stability at the expense of democracy in this region here in the Middle East, and we achieved neither. We achieved neither stability nor democracy. How are we doing now?
We are paying price. We in Kurdistan region, this is our view, that we are paying a price of that stability and one Iraq policy. We have suffered a great deal of one Iraq policy. It has failed. Unity has to be voluntary. You cannot impose from Washington unity on Iraq. When the peoples of Iraq are not united, you can't have it. You will have instability instead. We need realism, pragmatism in dealing with the problems of the Middle East. Leave it to them. We have suffered. A regime that has bombarded us with chemical gas, carried out the notorious Anfal operations, mass killings and mass murder, mass destruction. Yet we were expecting in the new Iraq, the new government who came to power, to apologize for the people of Kurdistan and to compensate them. But now we are seeing Iraqi army facing Kurdistan. The same cycle is repeating. It will not be stable. Be realistic, change this one Iraq policy, you will see stability.
You know, the choice in the Middle East, usually it's between bad options. And I do remember one of my meetings with President Mubarak of Egypt, and it was after President Bush left the room. And he was sitting there saying to me, democratization, democratization, what does he want? He doesn't understand the region. It's more complicated than that. And we know what happened later. So I believe that...
this is when you were foreign minister.
When I was a foreign minister, yes. I think that in an understanding, as I said at the beginning, that also the day after, we have states that we have this internal tension between different factions of the society, which is very deep, whether religious or even historical tribes, and therefore, it's not going to be easy, and I'm not that optimistic that the day after, you know, ending the civil war, starting civil society, and we would live, all of us will live happily ever after. This is not the situation. But I do believe that in an understanding that democracy is also a set of values, and without, he was talking about imposing. I'm not talking about imposing, but if you want to be part of the free world, and most of these states in the region, they want to be part of the world. They want the connections, they want the investments, they want to be economically part of this small village who is now the world. So if you want to be part of something, you need to apply to certain rules and certain parameters that basically represent the nature of democracy. We can have, you know, some rules that would apply. It's your choice if you want to adopt it or not. But if you would not adopt it, if you are not going to, don't expect us to support you, to invest, or to do certain things. I think that this would easily be the tension of you are forcing me to do something, but if you want be part of my camp or part of the free world, do it.
Can I believe, before you go there, I just want to exercise my very limited privilege as a panelist with the right to ask questions. When you talked about the two-state solution earlier, do you see, now that we're talking about democracy, does a single democratic state has a chance ever between the Israelis and the Palestinians? One state, democratic.
You're talking about one state between Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea instead of two states for two people?
Instead of two states, one state for everyone, but a democratic state. If we can do it in Canada, we can do it in the US. Can you do it in Israel?
No, it's not what you're doing in Canada and the US. It's what there was those trying to do in Yugoslavia or in other places in which you have different nationalities that couldn't live together, and we all, because of all the horrific pictures coming for this region, we all tend to forget what we saw there. I think it's going to be a lose-lose. I mean, us, as part of the Jewish people, we had our own national aspiration as peoples. And being a Jew, it's not a religious thing. It's being one people with a shared history, some shared values, some shared future in the state of Israel, hopefully. And the Palestinians, they have their own national aspiration. And therefore, the idea, and I respect that, as long as our security will be kept. So the idea is, I didn't say two states. I said two states for two peoples. Because the idea is not just to create another state in the region, or failed state in the region, or terror state in the region. We have enough of those, thank you. The whole idea is to have two states for two people. Each state represents the national aspiration of different peoples. Because if we are not going to do it, both our people will face an ongoing conflict in one state that I don't know what it will be. But all the conflicts that we are talking now about will be in this embarrassingly tiny place.
We are exactly 3 minutes away from the end. I apologize, Minister. Let me just take one more maybe from the gentleman over there, and then we wrap it up. Those are my instructions to wrap up at exactly 11 o'clock.
David Smolansky, I'm a mayor of El Hatillo in Caracas, Venezuela, recently in exile, was removed by the regime. This year in Venezuela, we have had 120 days consecutive protests. Regime killed 132 people, more than 10,000 wounded. We have an inflation of more than 1,000, and almost 300,000 children have malnutrition. I'm saying this because the regime in Venezuela has 19 years, has very close ties in the past with Saddam Hussein, that one of the last state visits was Hugo Chavez in Iraq, with Muammar Gaddafi, that one of the last visits he had was in Venezuela, and also with Bashar al-Assad in Syria. My house was attacked because I have Jewish ancestors. There is an anti-Semitism in Venezuela. So my question is, how, as dictators close their relations to maintain power, how can we build the democrats spaces?
I give you 1 minute, and I give you 1 minute.
I think it was more a statement than a question.
Okay. Do you want to take this?
No, in fact, I want to go to the other question. We want the United States to be heavily engaged, to have a hands-off policy, and also work out workable solution with the people in Iraq. This is from our perspective.
Okay, and with that, I have to conclude this panel. Thank you very much to the two panelists, Minister Bakir and Ms. Livni. Thank you all very much. I want to again thank the organizers for having invited me as an Al Jazeera person to moderate this panel. Thank you from all my colleagues throughout the world and in headquarters in Doha. Thank you all very much.